Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching. Fiona started a general cleaning job at the country mansion where she and her husband lived. The work was in full swing, and the woman turned on her cheerful, dynamic music and vacuumed, singing along to the tune from her headphones. Then she decided to take out the garbage, and suddenly she noticed something bright at the bottom of the basket. For some reason, her hand reached for the incomprehensible object, and the woman took it out of the trash can. It turned out to be a pregnancy test and was positive. Fiona went into a stupor, immediately turned off the music, and sat on the edge of her chair, staring at the test, unblinking and swaying from side to side. There was only one thought hammering in my head. This is the end. The test is definitely not mine, which means my husband has a mistress and even pregnant. What a bastard. I'm not allowed to have a baby, and she's allowed. Her whole life flashed before her eyes in that second. Fiona lost her parents early. They were gone when she was only 3 years old. Since then, Fiona was taken by her grandmother to her village and brought up on her own. Life in the village was not easy. It was hard. We got up late, went to bed late. The whole day was spent in hard work and taking care of the home and the household. Since childhood, Fiona loved medicine, treated animals, was kind and sympathetic. But when the girl turned 18, just before graduation, her grandmother died. She had been stunted and sick for a long time and faded away like a candle. No matter how you look at it, she was old. A distant relative had helped with the funeral, and she had advised Fiona to go to town. She lived there herself. The woman kept urging the girl, "Wait a minute with your medical school. It's no fun doing injections and giving drips. You understand that the most important thing for a girl is to get married. Then there's no need to work, especially since you're such a beauty. Legs from ear to ear, doll face, gorgeous hair braid up to the shoulder blades. Do you want me to help you meet a businessman? Come and visit us, and we'll invite him too. He's about 15 years older than you, but that's okay. The main thing is that he's loaded with money. If he likes you, you'll be like cheese and butter." Fiona was in deep shock after her grandmother's death. She didn't know how to live or what to do, so she just nodded in agreement, trusting her Aunt Maria. She wasn't a stranger, so she wouldn't give her bad advice. And so they did. Fiona came to stay with her aunt. That same evening, her business partner, Kevin, her husband, was invited to a dinner party. The man was in his 30s. He was outwardly very good looking, a good, charismatic, handsome man who knew his worth. Kevin adored girls, especially young and inexperienced ones. It was his weakness. Aunt Anna was well aware of this from her husband's stories, and they decided to play on it. When they were introduced at the table, Kevin started drooling. Maria chirped, "Let me introduce you, Kevin, to Fiona. She's my cousin's niece. Such a good girl. From the country. And such grief. Her grandmother raised her, and now she's dead. She's an orphan and all alone. She wants to go to medical school. She's here to visit. Fiona, this is Kevin. He's a highly respected businessman, my husband Tom's partner. I hope you two can be friends. Shall we raise our glasses and drink to our meeting?" Fiona said hello and blushed. The strange man was looking at her so expressively. He was staring at her, and Kevin was already mentally doing everything he could and could not with Fiona. He liked the girl madly. Everything he liked. Plump, sensual lips, beautiful eyes with a twist, slender, long-legged, and clearly not at all sophisticated in the pleasures of love. Blood and milk, what else can I say? You couldn't find a woman like that in the capital city these days. Kevin wooed Fiona all evening, made subtle hints and compliments, and asked her for her phone number. That's how they started dating. The man was exhausted and wanted to jump on the girl right away, but Fiona was completely wild, and at the slightest attempt to get under her blouse or skirt, She pushed her bow away and began to cry. Like I'm afraid, and that's it. Not only that, Maria strongly warned Kevin. They say if you like it, marry. The girl is good, hard-working, easygoing. The perfect wife, and don't you dare spoil your niece for nothing. She's family after all. So Kevin made up his mind. Why not really get married? How many women can you change like gloves? With such a beautiful woman, you can go out in public and in high society without being ashamed to show up. A month later, there was a magnificent wedding. It was all so sudden for Fiona. Her opinion wasn't asked at all. Aunt Maria and Kevin were in charge. She went on and on and on and on. There, Fiona, you'll thank me for the rest of your life. What a fiancé I've introduced you to. Now look, don't lose face. Obey your husband, do what he wants. Do your best. And you'll think your whole life is in the bag. And the confused Fiona didn't know if she really loved Kevin or not. Too little time had passed. Yes, she undoubtedly liked him, was intelligent, gallant, but she was, frankly, a little afraid of him. How would it all work out? Would they get along at home? How would the first wedding night go? The girl felt like a student before the most responsible and serious exam. Kevin was glowing, accepting congratulations, and never took a step away from his princess. He was literally counting the minutes until the bloody ceremony called "The wedding was over," to finally get what he longed for, his wife's innocence. And here they are, finally the two of them in the mansion. Fiona is so beautiful and fresh. Kevin eagerly untied the tight corset and helped her remove her wedding dress. He admired his wife's shape and figure. Now she belonged only to him. Just the thought of it turned him on like a madman, and Fiona was shaking like a fever. Several feelings were struggling in her. Desire, fear, shame. It was all mixed up. Her fears were completely unfounded. Kevin turned out to be a skilled and very sensitive lover, and their first intimacy went perfectly well. Kevin was passionate and tender at the same time. He whispered such words of love, called her happiness and sunshine, joy. For the first 6 months, they had a complete ideal. Fiona took care of the house and the household, and waited faithfully for her husband from work, while Kevin flew home as if on wings. The woman felt loved and wanted. However, soon the man got bored with the young maiden body. He was satiated with it, and he again wanted novelty and spice of sensations. Fiona was really a good hostess, had a good character, tried not to scandalize and smooth over sharp edges, fulfilling all the whims of her perpetually disgruntled husband. But every year, the situation only worsened. The most acute quarrels and fights between them were about children. Fiona badly wanted to be a mother, and that is normal for any woman. But Kevin was adamant about it and kept saying the same thing. It's still early. What's the rush? I'm all about doing and working. You can see I come in all exhausted, and there will be screaming, squealing, diapers and diapers. What's the rush? You've got your whole life ahead of you. You better give me a relaxing massage, just the way I like it. Come here, sweetheart. Fiona cried and resented it, but there was nothing she could do about it. So she took the damn birth control pills, secretly dreaming that soon Kevin would change his mind and they would become parents. But as the years passed, she and Kevin grew further and further apart, and no children were in sight. Recently, Fiona couldn't take it anymore and decided to have a serious talk. Kevin, I can't do this anymore. If you don't want me to have a baby, let's get one from an orphanage. There are so many abandoned and obfuscated kids. Let's go tomorrow. We'll go and see. I'm begging you. Don't you understand I'm suffering? I feel bad that I can't be a mom. The man grimaced as if he had a toothache, thinking to himself, what a nuisance. One idea is crazier than another. I don't know why he'd think of such a thing. But he answered aloud, not tomorrow. Sorry, honey, I have an unscheduled business trip just one day. I have to leave in the morning. Get me everything as usual. We'll come back to this later." Fiona couldn't stand it anymore and shouted, "Why do you always get away with it? Kevin, can't you see that we're like strangers now? We each have our own lives and we still don't have kids. Don't you understand? A baby will bring us back together. I want to be a mommy again. You're just selfish and stale and dry." Kevin also turned to a higher tone of voice. "Is there something you're missing? I took you because your aunt asked me to. You live like a coiffeuress, you go to exhibitions, charity events, to salons, and what else is wrong? Well, I don't want children. Is that a crime? That's it. We're done talking." And the man left, slamming the door so that it almost flew out. And Fiona cried with resentment and injustice for a long time. But today she found the ill-fated pregnancy test. So Kevin doesn't want kids from his wife, but he's having an affair on the side and he's ready to be a father? How could that be? Fiona started remembering the details of their married life lately. Kevin indeed was coming home increasingly late. She found other women's hair on his clothes, and sometimes he smelled of booze. But most importantly, the intimacy between them had almost completely disappeared. Of the former tenderness and passion left no trace. Now it was just spousal duty from time to time. Fiona couldn't stand it, and called her best friend Alyonka and sobbed and told her everything. She listened carefully, did not interrupt, and then answered, "Listen, Fiona, you say Kevin is leaving tomorrow morning. So take a cab and follow him. See where he's going, to the train station or not. You'll find out. In the meantime, pretend you don't know anything. Be patient. You need proof anyway. So you'll give him a scandal now, and what? He'll start denying it." Fiona decided to do just that. She got up early in the morning with her husband, made him coffee and sandwiches for the trip, kissed him gently on the cheek, and was on standby, a cab waiting for her around the corner. Just her husband out the door, and she after him. The cab driver was paid at once and generously, so he didn't ask too many questions and deftly followed Kevin's car. Imagine her surprise when her husband turned into a flower store instead of the train station. 15 minutes later, he came out of there with a huge armful of the most beautiful flowers, the same gorgeous bouquets he had once given her. Fiona felt a pang of jealousy right in her heart. Next thing she knew, the man had stopped outside a 5-star hotel. Fiona was shaking, so she waited a while, then followed. She asked the girl at the front desk in a frantic voice, "Excuse me, which room did that respectable gentleman go to? I have important business to attend to. A letter needs to be delivered." The girl smiled. "To the 20th suite. He's booked it for the day. There's a hot hottie already waiting for him. Probably on a romantic date. I don't want to bother you. You leave a letter and I'll tell him when he gets out." The blood rushed to Fiona's head. She couldn't hear the girl's last words and rushed out into the fresh air. She was asphyxiated. That was it. There was no more doubt. Tears rolled down the woman's cheeks in a hail of tears, covering everything around her. "Bastard! Bastard! Shall I go back and make a scandal? Oh no, I can't stand it. It will be unbearably painful to watch my husband having fun with his mistress. And it's all so low and dirty. So now you're left, Fiona, without children, without a husband, without an education, without a home, no out. One wants you and all alone. What to do? Where to run to? I don't want to see that scoundrel again. It turns out that Kevin only needed me for pleasure, and when he got tired of me, he immediately found a new doll. And it was my own fault. I should have gone to medical school. I would have had a profession, and what's wrong with that? I don't care. I'll go home to the countryside. It's all right. People live there too. I'll be all right. I'd rather die of hard work, but I'll never go back to Kevin." The cab driver, watching his traveling companion rushing back and forth, sobbing and clutching her head, understood, of course, all at once. So, the husband was unfaithful after all, and what was he missing? Such a beautiful woman, you can't take your eyes off her. He got out of the car, quietly approached the woman, and touched her lightly by the sleeve. I'm sorry, do you have somewhere else to go? Or am I free? Fiona looked at him with eyes full of tears and nodded her head. Yes, now home to where you pick me up, and then to the train station, if you can. I'll pay extra. You'll just have to wait a little while until I get my things together. The cab driver sighed. No need to pay extra. You've already given me plenty. I understand. Let's go. Don't look so worried. Whatever God does, it's all for the best. Everything will work out. It happens so often in life you think it's over, and then in time it's even funny. The troubles that seemed insurmountable at the time are really nothing. It was as if Fiona could not hear him and was just staring at one point, thinking about something of her own. She was in such shock and prostration that she was not thinking straight at all. The woman was sobbing, frantically gathering things into her suitcase and documents. She wanted to leave a note for the scoundrel, but then changed her mind and rushed out of the mansion. She cried and cried, and there was nothing she could do about it. At the train station, she took an electric train ticket, got into a half-empty car, and drove back to her place in Kamenetz. Trees and houses flashed outside the window, as if they were saying goodbye to her. Fiona was frightened and worried, hurt by her husband's betrayal. She did not know and did not understand how and why she could go on living. The woman stepped out of the wagon and wandered for a long time along the dusty country road, familiar from her childhood. At last, she saw her home. What Fiona saw shocked her even more. In the 4 years she had been away since her grandmother's death, the place had been in a state of disrepair. The yard and vegetable garden were overgrown with weeds and wild bushes. The porch was in ruins, and the windows, long since unwashed and dirty, were depressing. The woman could barely open the long rusted padlock and stepped inside. Everything here was the same as it had been in her grandmother's lifetime. Only the dust and cobwebs all around were enormous. Fiona sat down on the bed with the feather bed, on which she had slept so sweetly as a child, and cried again. Her hands were drooping, and she did not want to live at all. Then she glanced in passing at her grandmother's portrait on the wall, and it seemed to her that the latter looked at her with such reproach, as in her childhood, when her granddaughter had done something wrong. The look of her grandmother literally said, "Why are you so gloomy? Do not give up. You have to work, and then bad thoughts will not come into your head. Only lazy loafers suffer, and we villagers have no time." It was my grandmother's favorite saying, and Fiona became angry with herself. Why, really, I'm like a fool, crying and crying. There's so much work to do, but get up and get some water. I'll get the house in order, and then I'll go on crying. And the woman rolled up her sleeves and began to actively clean up, washing and putting things in order. The saddest thing was that the well in the yard had dried up and run dry. Fiona had to fetch water from the river, and for drinking even further away, from the spring. At the local village store, the woman bought about a week's worth of groceries and cooked dinner. She was so exhausted from the day's work that she fell into bed without eating. But in the middle of the night she was awakened by some screams coming from the yard. The woman was frightened, took a lantern, threw on her jacket, crossed herself, and went to see what had happened. Someone was shouting from the well pit, "Help! Help! Somebody!" "I'm not getting out." The woman ran up to the well and shone a light into it. At the bottom sat a frightened little boy and a small kitten covered in silt. Fiona shouted to him, "Oh my God, baby, are you okay? How long have you been sitting there? How'd you fall in the hole, anyway?" The boy cried out to her through sobs, "It's 5. 0. I was walking home, and I heard a kitten crying in your yard. I couldn't help myself, so I waved over the fence to see, and he fell into the hole, and he was crying so pitifully, so I followed him. I thought it would be easy to get out, but I didn't calculate my strength. I could reach the middle, but then I couldn't. There was nothing to hold on to. I've got my hands all torn up. What a kind soul you are. Now be patient. I'll find a ladder and a rope." The woman somehow lowered a dilapidated wooden ladder she had found in the barn, and the boy and the kitten crawled out quickly and deftly. It was not a sight for the faint-hearted. Both were like chimney sweeps, dirty and dirty. The kitten had calmed down in the boy's arms and stopped screaming. Fiona was moved to tears for the poor creatures. She commanded, "Okay, come with me. I'm going to bring you my clean clothes and a towel. Take a bath and wash the kitten with soap and water in the basin. I'll wash your clothes, and I'll heat up dinner. I only have potatoes and sausage. I won't let you out for the night, but I'll take you home in the morning." "All right. I'm Fiona, by the way." The boy nodded his head and introduced himself businesslike, just like an adult. "I'm William. I live with my daddy and stepmother on the outskirts of the village. Everybody knows me around here. My daddy got seriously injured at work. He got hit by a tree 6 months ago, and my stepmother doesn't like us. When my dad was healthy, she was so fond of him. Of course, our house is big and nice. Dad earned a lot of money. He used to felling wood. And when he fell ill, my stepmother hardly lives with us anymore. She disappears somewhere in the city all day and night. She says she works in shifts, but I don't believe her. But I won't leave my daddy. I do everything myself, and I look after him." After the bath, Fiona finally got a good look at her guests. The boy was very handsome, open, and smiling. They fed the kitten with warm milk and called him Jim. William also ate with pleasure. It was obvious that the boy was very hungry, and everyone went to bed. Fiona got up early and began to fuss in the kitchen, making semolina and frying pancakes on yeast, just like her grandmother's. William immediately washed his face and ran in at the smell. He complimented Fiona. "Wow, only my mother used to fry these for me when I was a kid. I'd forgotten how good it was, and the porridge is great. No lumps. Thank you, that was delicious." Fiona patted his hair. "Thank you, William. I'll get some more breakfast for your daddy while it's hot, and then we'll go. Feed Jim for now. Will you take him?" The boy stroked the purring pet behind the ear and cuddled it gently. "I will, of course. We have a big house and yard, enough space. I love animals, and so does my dad. I feel so sorry for him. He cries so much at night from the beef, Fiona, and he can't do anything. He just bites his fists. Maybe a kitten would cheer him up a little." Fiona and William talked the whole way. She felt so good with this cheerful and mature, restless boy for his age. How she wished she had a son like that, to take care of someone, not to feel lonely. William's house was a large, well-built house, obviously built to last. But when they went inside, Fiona was almost knocked off her feet by the smell of a man lying there. It was obvious that there had been no female supervision or hand, holding here for a long time. Things were scattered here and there, dust and dirt everywhere. William took her into his father's bedroom. What she saw shocked her to the core. In bed lay a thin, haggard young man. He had not had his hair cut or shaved in a long time, and the bed had obviously not been changed in months. When he saw such a beautiful woman in front of him, he was embarrassed. "Hello, do I know you? I'm sorry it's not tidy. I can't get up at all. I'm chained to the damn bed forever, and my son is still small. He helps as much as he can. But you know, he's only 9 years old. I wish I could die quicker and not torture myself and my son. I have no strength at all." Fiona opened the window and pulled back the dusty curtains. "It's no big deal. I just moved to the country yesterday myself. I haven't been here for 4 years. You should see what's going on in my house. Although I was born and grew up here. But I don't remember you, do I? My name's Fiona." "And you are?" The man replied, "I'm Max. I'm an orphan myself. Grew up in an orphanage. My teachers told me that my roots are here, in this village. That's why I came here to live. I got a job at the forestry. Built a house with my own hands. I married Anna. I loved her very much. I met her at a dance at the village club. She was such a clever girl, a cleaner and a hostess. The house shined and shined with her. We kept a garden, a small farm for ourselves, had a baby boy. But my wife had severe complications after childbirth. She was treated for a long time. But when William was 5 years old, she died anyway. The doctors in the village missed her and she had cancer. They didn't notice it in time. And that was it. I grieved so much. My son was the only thing that kept me in this world. I didn't break down for him. I didn't start drinking, and I wanted to. I only drank once, after Anna's funeral, and then I woke up in the morning. My head was cracking. My son was crying hungrily, calling for his mother, and I made a vow to myself, not a drop. We started to live together. A year ago, I met Eva when I was in town on business. We bumped into each other in a store. That's how we met. I told her everything honestly about my wife and my son. She said she loved me and that she came to live with us. But she didn't get along with William. Her son didn't like her. That's all. I was angry with him at first. I thought he wanted to break us up on purpose. He was jealous. And only now I understand that he was right. While I was earning a lot, Eva was all over me. She changed outfits one after another. She didn't want to keep the farm. The garden was my responsibility. And her manicure would go bad, you see. But I loved her a lot, and I forgave her everything, as long as she was there. And when I was hit by a huge pine tree at work, and I was left disabled, it was like the wind blew her away. She disappeared in the city, came once a week to change things, turned her nose up at me, didn't even look at me, like I was nothing. He says he's working, but there's no money, no her. Just stories. It's understandable who needs a lying down man. And with a son in his arms, Fiona unwrapped the foil with the food she had brought and sat down next to her on a chair. Yes, your situation is really critical. It couldn't be worse. I can't even believe that a small child can cope with everything. I also do not know how to live. I lived with a rich husband for 4 years. He did not allow me to have children. And the day before yesterday, I found out that he had a mistress. And she was pregnant. So I decided to go back to the countryside, to my homeland. You know what, Max? Can I help you a little neighborly? I'll cook dinner, clean up a bit, and take care of you. Don't be shy. I'm almost a doctor, but I'm not. In the meantime, have your breakfast. I boiled some semolina and made some pancakes. I hope you like it. Let me help you sit down. Yeah, that's right. And we'll put a pillow under your back. Your William saved a kitten yesterday. He climbed into an empty well in my yard to get it. That's how we met. He's a good boy. He's kind. He loves animals. And after what I learned about you, in my eyes, he is a real hero. Fiona, without waiting for an answer, called out to William, "Baby, I need your help. You're the boss, aren't you? Bring a bucket, Rags. Show me where you have a basin, towels, clean linens. In general, help. We're going to clean up your house today." William was glad that Fiona was staying with him for the time being, and he gladly began to help her. The two of them cleaned up, cooked soup and baked a fish pie, and tended to Max. Fiona gave him a bath, gave him a mirror, and he shaved under her pressure. And she gave him a haircut and changed his bed. The man was terribly embarrassed. He was very embarrassed. He was very embarrassed that such a beautiful woman was courting him, and his Eve was having fun somewhere. Shame on him. Toward evening, Fiona started to go home. She told Max, "You should first of all be seen by an experienced doctor in the ST units. And secondly, we should get you a wheelchair. That way, you can at least walk and do something around the house. You really are a hero for standing in bed so long. It's crazy, isn't it? I'll help you. I'll go into town tomorrow. I know people at the World of Hope Foundation. Give me copies of your diagnosis and documents. I'll try to get help. In the meantime, I'll buy at least a simple wheelchair." Max almost cried, "Thank you, Fiona. I can't believe that a stranger wants to help just like that. From the heart. Tell me, why would you want that?" You know how many neighbors said at first, hang in there, Max, we won't leave you. But in the end, Aunt Ducia comes by every couple of weeks and brings me and William a bowl of soup. That's all the help. Fiona answered quietly. You see, Max, it's very important for me to take care of someone right now. And you and William are very nice and sympathetic to me, so will you let me do it? I can't be alone in four walls. It makes me think of my husband cheating on me, and I want to cry. Fiona called the founders of the foundation and made an appointment for tomorrow. She drove into town first thing in the morning. She had nowhere else to stay except Lukyanov's mansion. After all, decided Fiona, I am not divorced from my husband yet, so I have a legal right to be here. She walked in just as Kevin's car pulled up in the yard. He got out, then opened the door and held out his hand to a beautiful brunette woman. Fiona looked at her and almost fainted. It was Max's roommate. They had a lot of pictures of each other on their wall. The husband, seeing his wife, was also almost speechless because he wasn't at all upset that she herself had disappeared somewhere. Kevin tried to wriggle out of it now too. Fiona, where the hell have you been? I call. You don't pick up the phone. What's that supposed to mean? The woman just grinned and answered, looking him straight in the eye. Kevin, stop trying to make a comedy. I know everything. I saw you at the hotel, and I found the pregnancy test too. So don't try to play the abusive spouse card. We're getting a divorce. Period. By law, all property acquired is divided in half. I don't want your house or your cars. Just pay me what I tell you, and we'll say goodbye. And live happily ever after. And live happily ever after. Aren't you ashamed, madam, to leave your bedridden lover and have an affair on the side? Eva went pale and changed her face. So you know that, too. How do you know that? Who are you to tell me how to live my life? I'm still a young, beautiful woman, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with an invalid, okay? Fiona answered quietly. More than that. Let that be on your conscience. Everyone will be rewarded for their actions. It is not for me to judge you, but know this, you're both scoundrels. Good day. Kevin pulled out his wallet and slipped his wife a wad of money, angrily dropping it. Is that enough? The spouse replied, That's enough. Just so you know, it's not me who needs the money. It's a very good man who's been dumped by your new girlfriend. So think about it. If you're in trouble, she'll get over you too. Eva started yelling, insulting Fiona, and throwing an ugly tantrum. Fiona ran out into the street and began frantically dialing the number of the cab. She was shaking and feeling so nasty and rotten. Poor Max, he was the worst of all. He was the worst of all. He had such a snake on his chest. We must help him by all means. And it's a pity he's the only one who can cope with it all. And that at 9 years old, the first thing the woman did was to go to a charitable foundation and leave there all the coordinates and copies of Max's documents to help. Then she bought a good wheelchair, a lot of groceries, necessary medicines, and hygiene products for care. I did not forget about William. He got him some normal new clothes and some toys and books. Fiona went straight to Max's house. William, when he saw her, was very happy to see her and hugged her as if she were his own. He looked into her eyes and asked, Oh, are you coming to visit us or for good? Stay. I feel so good with you. I'll help you in everything, honestly, and I'll stop being naughty. Just don't leave me and Daddy like that, Eva, please. He's at least a little more alive since you came. He's smiling now. Tears came to Fiona's eyes and she stroked the boy. Don't worry, William. I won't betray or leave you. And I'll help your daddy for sure. You'll see he'll get back on his feet. You have to believe that. When Max saw Fiona, he lit up and brightened up. Fiona, good afternoon. I'm so glad you've come to us again. I thought you'd forgotten all about us. Wow, is that a wheelchair? For me. My God, it costs so much money. I looked it up online. I can't give it to you yet. The woman smiled. Max, I don't need to give anything away. I do it from the heart from the heart, so don't insult me. Come on, let's try to move, shall we? William, go help. Together they put Max in the stroller, and Fiona took him out into the yard. The man was sobbing with happiness, for he had not left his room or his bed once since his injury. Max enjoyed breathing in the fresh air, looking at the green trees and singing birds, and for the first time he wanted to live again. Fiona saw how happy he was and started walking around the yard with him and showing him around. She said, "See, you need to make a new bench and trim the bushes. Look, the first daffodils are blooming. Isn't it beautiful? I just love them since childhood. Now I will take you for a walk every day. Tomorrow we will go to the river, to the spring. It's so nice and quiet. And now I'm going to cook dinner. And then we'll eat, and I'll give you a massage. I bought medicinal ointments and painkillers. You need to get your muscles used to moving. You've been stiff enough as it is. Hopefully the beefy-ons will go away a little after that. You can't keep swallowing such strong painkillers all the time." Max couldn't hold back his tears. They rolled past his fiancée down his sunken cheeks. He wiped them with his sleeve and whispered, "Fiona, stay here and live. You are like a good fairy who burst into my gray and joyless everyday life and painted the life of a helpless invalid in bright colors. And I don't want to see Eva again. If she dares to show up, I'll throw her out right away." The woman answered quietly, "Don't worry, Eva won't come here again. I saw her yesterday. It's a small world, you won't believe it. She's my husband's pregnant mistress. Can you imagine that? That's what she does for a living in the city. It must be painful for you to hear that. Do you still love her? We are both hurt by this situation." Max sighed and answered seriously, "No, Fiona." I was even relieved. Laura and I had never been close souls. All she was interested in was my money. William is much smarter than I am. He figured that out much earlier, and I took you at heart. You know, I feel like I've known you for years. I really like you. I really do. But I know that life with an invalid is a pain, and I'm afraid that you'll get tired of it, and you'll only suffer with me, and regret that we met. After all, you're beautiful. You can easily find a normal guy, have a baby, and I, alas, am not capable of that either. After the surgery, the doctors gave me the verdict. I'm infertile. There was something wrong with my spine. Fiona abruptly turned the stroller around and looked him straight in the eye. "Max, remember, you're not an invalid. Stop talking like that. I believe that together we will cure your disability and you will get back on your feet. But you have to want it first and foremost. I don't care if you're in a wheelchair or on your own feet. You and William are the closest people to me right now. And I'm not Eva. I won't betray you. Do you understand? God only knows whether we'll have children or not. They're not born at someone else's whim. Let me just be there for you. And don't try to calculate everything 100 years in advance." The man took her hand and held it in his for a long time, enjoying the warmth and softness of his native palm. From that day on, Fiona, Max, and William began to live together. The woman worked like a squirrel in a kiosk. William helped her with everything, and in a couple of months, the house and the garden were unrecognizable. Everything was well groomed, the beds were level, and everything was clean, tidy. William was transformed, too. Now he was a well-groomed, well-dressed boy, like everyone else. When Fiona took Max for a walk every day to the river or to the woods, the neighbors would only give him a quizzical look. What a mad woman! So young, so beautiful. Why should she be such a burden? She's her granddaughter. She traded her life with a rich man for this feeble cripple. What's going on in people's heads? Max is not a bad guy. An economic, but to live with Fiona Sicknome is such a torment. The previous roommate couldn't stand it. She ran away quickly, and that's all they saw of her. Soon, Olga would get tired of playing Mother Teresa. And William the trailer as well. and only the old man sharply besieged them. "Why are you so mean, ladies? We all walk under God. Trouble may come knocking on everyone's door. What's a guy gonna rot alive now? Look at the way she looks at him and he holds her hand. It's obvious that they're in love. Yuck on you silly chickens. They don't want to help. They wash their bones every day." The old man began to visit Max in a neighborly way, undertook with him to rearrange the porch. The chimney of the stove was cleaned. The men began to socialize. Fiona was only too happy about it. She welcomed the pensioner with tea and cakes and was always happy to see him. After all, the more Max socializes, the less he closes himself off and slowly opens up to people, and the old man sincerely admired the resilience and courage of this young woman who so selflessly looked after Max. "Only a few people are capable of that." A reply came from the charitable foundation. Max's documents were sent to foreign clinics, and in Germany Professor Stolz promised to take on his difficult case. But the sum for the operation and rehabilitation was simply fantastic. The foundation began collecting money, but things moved slowly. Then Fiona decided to encourage Max to get involved too. At the same time, he would be busy, no time to mope. The woman could see that the boy really did have golden hands. He worked wonderfully with wood. He burned beautifully. So she suggested it. "Listen, Max, try to make some caskets in your workshop. Get William involved. And when I go to sell eggs and vegetables, I'll take them. So a penny more money will be added." The man was fired up about the idea, and he and Fiona felt much better. Care, proper nutrition, training, and massages relieved his condition, and his back didn't hurt like hell anymore. He could bear it. Max's work spun, and he turned out to have a talent for it. All the souvenirs came out so unusual and stunningly beautiful that they bought very eagerly, and time flew by while he was working, and life did not seem so dull anymore. Max was ready for anything for his Fiona. As long as she smiled and was always there for him, she was amused to Max, a stimulus to life. In addition, despite their illness, the young people became close, and now they spent every night together. And Fiona often found herself thinking that those 4 years of life with the snob Kevin had been lived for nothing. She and Kevin had never been anywhere near as united as they were with Max. The young people understood each other, not just half a word, but with a single glance. They were happy together, that was all. A few more months passed. Suddenly one day, there was a persistent knock on Max's gate. It was early morning, and Fiona woke up, kissed Max, and said grudgingly, "Who's that at this hour? I'll go get it. Maybe the milk's here." A sleepy Fiona threw on her robe and went to open it. On the threshold stood a horny man and an elderly couple stomping beside him. A man and a woman were obviously of Balzac age, but they were dressed very expensive and tasteful, and not even a very well-to-do person had a late model Ferrari. The old man next door started the first conversation. "Good morning, Fiona. Here, I brought you some guests." They drove around the village asking about the orphaned man. I didn't think of it at first, but then I suddenly remembered that Max is an orphan, wasn't he? Surprised, Fiona invited her guests into the house and began to ask what was going on. "My name is Fiona, and my husband's name is Max. He'll tell you all about it now. I don't know the details of his childhood. Wait a minute, I'll help him get dressed. William, my son, come here. Offer the guests some tea and warm up some cheesecakes." The nimble boy immediately oriented himself and began talking to the older people. And Fiona went to Max. "Honey, you've got company. Let's get dressed and go meet them." A man and a woman, about 70 years old. They look very rich. They look very rich. They are looking for a man of your age, an orphan. Max was perplexed. What's that got to do with me? How many of them are there in the world? There's no peace in my own house either. We wanted to stay in bed tonight, didn't we? Fiona smiled and kissed Max on the cheek. Don't be mean. I know how you don't like to socialize because of your beefiness. But since people have come from so far away, give them your attention. It would simply be rude to ask them to leave. You have to listen to them. She helped him into the stroller and took him into the kitchen. There William was already chirping and telling the guests how he had saved the kitten from the well. They were amazed. Seeing Max, the older woman replied, "Hello. Are you Max? We need to talk to you. My name is Kiva, and this is my husband Edward. We're going to ask you a question. Don't be indelicate. Do you happen to have a butterfly mole on your left shoulder? It's very important." Surprised, Max silently took off his shirt and showed off his mole. It was really quite an unusual shape. Rarely do you meet such a mole. Seeing the mole, the woman cried out and suddenly fainted. Right on the floor, Fiona was frightened and rushed over to her guest. She splashed water on her and waved a towel at her. A commotion ensued. Finally, the woman came to her senses and immediately cried, through the sobs she could only make out, Son, we found you. Edic, we did it. Our son is here." Max did not understand anything. Fiona poured valacordine into a glass of water and gave it to the poor woman to drink. While she was coming to her senses, Edward began the story. "Listen to us, please, and you will understand everything. Although I still don't believe it myself. My wife and I have been together all our lives, ever since we were students. We started our first business together, opened our own mini pizzeria. We baked it ourselves. We brought food. My wife was a saleswoman, and then we hired people, expanded, and opened another one and more. Over the years, we have a long-established network of pizzerias Italiano. I think it is unnecessary to explain how much time, nerves, money, and life was spent on it all. So at first we consciously decided to postpone with children. We had no time for that. We came to our senses only when we were both 35. But it turns out that children are not born at one's will. We had been to so many clinics. We were despairing when at last Keva miraculously got pregnant. I can't tell you how happy we were. I took care of her, didn't let her overexert herself. All she did was shop. She went to the wholesaler and checked how the process was going. Pregnancy was complicated. The delivery was a little bit premature. Then my son was born. At first he was so weak, took a long Beffiano. We were so worried about him. And then, when he was half a year old, my spouse went for a routine checkup at a private children's Fianna clinic. I, as if on a sin, on a business trip, at a meeting with business partners was. My wife has her own car. She is an excellent driver. Victor was in a child's seat. Nothing foretold of trouble that day. But it was winter. The road was shifted by snow on the highway. An SUV drove off on the oncoming lane, which suddenly twisted to the left, and in an instant he was in front of the car of Clara. The wife had literally some fractions of a second to evade the collision into the ditch. Her car flew off the curb and overturned several times. Kiva continued the story. She had already come to her senses. I hit my head hard at the time. I don't remember anything. It was passing motorists who saw the tragedy and called an ambulance. I regained consciousness, but then I blacked out again, and I came to my senses only after the operation, a day later. The first thing I asked, or rather screamed, "Where is my son? Victor, did you find him?" But everyone just shook their hands, and neither the baby nor the baby seat were found. We didn't look for it again and again. All in vain. My husband tried all sorts of connections, but there were no results. The police closed the case. They said that in such a cold weather, the child would not survive. Most likely he died, and the body and the seat fell into the river. The accident happened near the bridge. I was treated in a neurological clinic for a long time. I thought I wouldn't make it. I didn't want to live at all. Then we tried many more times to get pregnant, but to no avail. God never gave us more children. Edic saw how I was suffering and offered to adopt a child, but for some reason, I could not accept the fact that my son had died. Here, in my heart, there was hope that maybe he had survived. Maybe someone had picked him up. I took up charity work. We have been helping homeless people and beggars for many years. We feed them in a special canteen, treat them for free, bring them clothes. We don't let them die. Do you know how many people are crippled among them? There were even candidates of science. Just one day, some tragedy knocked a man down, and there was simply no one to help. And he went downhill, began to drink, and hit rock bottom. So recently we were treating a homeless man for a sheepdog bite, and we got to talking. And he suddenly began to tell an amazing story. He told us that 28 years ago, he had done a good deed and saved a dying baby. It turns out that on that fateful evening when I was in a car accident, he was wandering near the fishermen's spots. They often leave unfinished bottles and food, so he heard a faint squeak in the snow. Thought he heard a faint squeak or an animal, but it was a baby lying there, and a child's chair lying next to it. He did not hesitate to put it under his jacket, closer to his body, and rushed like the wind to the shelter. He put it on the porch and started pounding on the door. When he saw someone coming, he ran away. He didn't want to get in trouble with the police. He had been beaten by them more than once. We could not believe our ears. We went to that shelter. Thank God the manager was still alive. We paid her very generously, and she agreed to go through all the archives. That's how we found you, Max. She said that after graduating from the orphanage, you were rumored to have gone to the countryside, because they all thought that you were dropped off by one of the local troubled women. That's how they unwound the yarn. Son, I can't believe I'm seeing you in front of my eyes. Tell me about yourself. How did you grow up? What happened to you? Why are you in a stroller? Max almost sobbed. He couldn't stand it and pressed himself against his father, then his mother, and whispered softly the most cherished word that he had dreamed of saying all his childhood. Hello, Mommy. Fiona couldn't contain her emotions, and she cried too, and William alone was perplexed. Why are you all crying? Everything's fine. I guess I got my grandparents too, huh? Well, that's great. I've been having a lot of luck lately. First Fiona's mom showed up, then Grandma and Grandpa. Max calmed down a little and began to talk. I've been growing up in an orphanage as long as I can remember. The babysitters told me that I had been dropped off on the porch when I was a baby. Other children were sometimes visited by their parents or at least some relatives, but no one ever came to see me. It was especially depressing and frustrating on my birthday. I never even celebrated it. I didn't like it. I was mentally offended at my parents. I thought, why did they give birth to a child if they abandoned him? Before I met my wife, I had never had a normal life. All my childhood I was like a wolf, surviving, fighting, and fighting and fighting for an extra ration of food. I thought I would never get enough of bread. I moved to the village, built a house, got married, had him. Only my wife died of a long bruise. And 6 months ago I also became disabled. A tree fell on me. My partner was disappearing. I was bedridden, and poor William looked after me as best he could. But how much can a 9-year-old do? And then Fiona came into my worthless life. She was the one who made me Fiona this very life again. She bought me a wheelchair, gives me massages and exercises, and we love each other. William is fond of her. He calls her Mama, and he loves her too. That's when Fiona stepped in. We're collecting for the operation. In Germany, Professor Stolz is ready to take care of Max, but the amount is enormous and unaffordable. The charitable foundation and we ourselves are collecting a little, but so far there is only a third of it in the account, and time is running out. The doctor said that if another 6 months passes, it is unlikely that anything can be done. We have to hurry. I'm so worried we might be too late. I believe Max will get back on his feet and walk. All we have to do is get the damn money together. Look at all the wonderful boxes he makes himself, and I'm selling them. Edward took the souvenir in his hand and cried out, "It's beautiful, really. You have golden hands, son. I'll transfer the necessary amount of money for the operation today, Fiona. Give me the details of the clinic and the doctor's coordinates. In the meantime, get ready to go. I think the flight will leave in a few days. Fiona was taken aback. How about the other day? And the passport? We just applied for it, and there's a 3-month wait. What about William? I won't leave Max there alone. I'll be with him all the time. But I don't have anyone to leave William with. He's only 9 years old, isn't he? Kiva grinned. Don't worry about him. We'll sit with him. He's just visiting his grandmother. Isn't he a grandchild? I think he'll like it in our mansion. My husband will take care of the paperwork. Don't worry. He has connections everywhere. It's just a small thing. The main thing is that you, my son, get well. We don't spare any money for that. Max clung to his mother again like a little child. Thank you, all my family. 4 months ago, I was just lying in bed, not wanted, rotting alive, and my poor son was breaking into 100 pieces to help me somehow. Honestly, I only prayed to God for one thing, to die as soon as possible, and not to suffer. I had no strength at all, and nowhere to wait for help. And now I am the happiest man on earth. I have a son, a beloved and most precious woman, and a father and a mother. What more could I want? It felt like all of my unfulfilled childhood dreams had come true at once. I still can't believe it. His father kept his word, and a week later Max was operated on in Munich. Fiona sat beside him, literally glued to his side. Even the staff were amazed at her resilience. She whispered day and night how much she loved her Max. She gave him hope that he would get back on his feet. The worst began when that moment came. The Bifians were strong. The muscles atrophied and did not want to obey. Every step was given through torture with savage pain. Max screamed, biting his fist until it bled, but endured everything. In moments of despair, he looked at his Fiona, and she whispered to him, I'm proud of you, and I love you. You can do anything. We'll dance a waltz at the wedding. Let's do it one more time, shall we? And he got up and walked again and again, until, after 2 months of rehabilitation, he finally stood on his feet and began to walk confidently, leaning only on an elegant cane. Upon their return, Mom, Dad, and a happy William were waiting for them at the airport. He jumped up and down on his father's neck as he had before, and literally hung on him, tears rolling down his cheeks. He whispered to his father, Daddy, I missed you and Mom so much. It's so good to have you home. Grandma and Grandpa's place is great, though. Can you believe I know how to play golf now? Grandpa says. I'm really good at putting balls in the hole. Fiona hugged William too. Honey, I missed you too. I didn't recognize you. Such a fancy guy now. I see your grandma's spoiling you. And what a phone. Afterwards, Max hugged his mother and father for a long time and thanked them incessantly for their help. Kiva wailed, Why have we been crowding here for an hour, gathering onlookers? I've prepared everything at home. I've set the table. Why don't we all go to our place? Do you young people mind? What do you have to do in the countryside? Max can't carry any weights yet, and we have all the comforts of civilization. The house is huge. Everyone will have their own room with a balcony. And if you do not want to live with us old people, we can buy you an apartment in the residential area. You decide for yourself. Max and Fiona answered without talking. We'd love to live together, get to know each other better. And then we'll see. Max was dumbfounded by the beauty and luxury of the apartment. Fiona was used to it. She had lived in a golden cage with Kevin for 4 years. They all sat down to dinner, and Keva did her best. There were all sorts of treats. Then my mom started showing Max pictures of him as a baby. She cried and remembered, Here, honey, you're the one who was just born. A discharge from the maternity hospital. What a happy father. He's holding you in his arms. And this is us bathing you. You were so skinny, just like a little boy. You loved the water so much. You closed your eyes and dozed off. And me and your father, We're making love. Then the woman reached into the chifforobe and pulled out a whole pile of children's things. She went through them and cried again. I couldn't throw them away. I couldn't help it. I pressed the overalls against me, and I think they smell like my son's. Edict scolded. Do not wound. And for me, it was like an outlet. I cried a lot, and it seemed to make me feel better. She hugged Max again. I'm so glad we're together now, and I'm not afraid to die. I just barely got used to calling you Max. In my memory, you're Victor, that's all. A month went by. Max began to get into his father's business and to learn the basics of his business. He had already dreamed of retiring, and now he had an heir to entrust it all to, and Fiona was finally taking over William's education. They did a lot of reading and math. The boy was remarkably bright, though he had not been much use to anyone for a long time, and absorbed everything on the fly. He was enrolled in an elite private school with profound study of foreign languages. English was surprisingly easy for Petya. Fiona began to notice some stirring in her stomach, some unexplainable tremors, and all the time she wanted to eat. The woman decided to see a doctor. She made an appointment with her trusted doctor, and she went with her son's fiancé for support. When Fiona got dressed after the exam, the astonished gynecologist even took off her glasses. She pronounced, Comrades, I'm shocked. This is the 21st century. My dear, do you really not understand what is happening to you? How can you be so negligent about your health? Fiona was frightened into silence, assuming the worst, and Kevis asked, What's the matter, Ginny? Are you going crazy? Is it something serious? What disease did you miss? The doctor laughed. A woman is 16 weeks pregnant. Her baby is already moving, and she doesn't understand what's going on. Young lady, when did you have to register? Or are you not going to be registered with us? Will you come straight to the birth? Fiona couldn't believe it and started gibbering. I was, you know, saving my fiancé. I was nervous. I spent 2 months with him in Germany in the clinic, and his cycle was out of sync. I understood that. But I thought it was from stress. But I had no symptoms at all. No nausea, no morning sickness, nothing. Oh my God, is it really true? Max will be so happy. We've been dreaming about having kids. I thought it was impossible because of his BNS, but here it is. It's a miracle, isn't it? Fiona had an ultrasound, and it showed that the woman was expecting a boy. Kavadi was secretly shedding tears of happiness. Lo and behold, another grandchild on her doorstep. In the evening, when Max and Edward returned home, Fiona couldn't resist handing him the very same ultrasound photo. The man spun it back and forth. What is it? I do not understand. Fiona laughed. Your son. Can't you see? Here's the head, the nose, the hands, the feet. Max looked at her dumbfounded. What son? The doctors told me at the time, after the operation, that my childbearing function was impaired, and I was now infertile. Fiona just threw up her hands. I don't know, you tell me. Daddy, aren't you glad at least? William, you're going to have a brother. The boy immediately shouted, Hooray! And rushed to his grandfather to tell him the incredible news, and Max just stood there like a statue. He kept looking at the ultrasound and smiling blissfully. Finally, he hugged Fiona, stroked her tummy, and whispered, Now I know for sure. Miracles happen. We're having a baby boy. Fiona, we have to get married right away. The baby has to have a father. And you're already my wife, only now we're going to make it official. So, marry me. Fiona laughed. I'd love to, but when I think I'm about to be divorced from that scoundrel Kevin, I don't want to see him. Do you believe it? Max promised her. I'll talk to my father. I think he'll solve everything quickly and without your participation. And you cannot doubt me. You are my muse, my ray of light, my ideal, and I will never betray you. And I will never betray you and change you for no one. I don't care what you'll be or what you'll look like because I love you with all my heart. And I don't want anyone else." Fiona clung gently to Max. At that moment, she was perfectly happy, and she knew that he would be her lifelong support. She wasn't angry with Kevin at all, now. In fact, she was even grateful for that betrayal. Otherwise, she would never have met Max, and she would never have become a mother. And then she suddenly remembered the words of that very strange cab driver, and he was right in the middle of it. All things work out for the best. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel, like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.